Well, our next speaker is the co-founder of Simplicit, a customer-led innovation and design consultancy focusing on taking behavioural insights and developing strategic design solutions across a range of products, services and systems. Brought to you by Samsung, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the brains behind the innovation, Simplicit co-founder and director, Jodie Moule. Welcome.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Thank you. Unlike Sean, I'm excited to have a headset on. It's giving me a bit of a Madonna moment. I've never worn one of these before though, so bear with me if I'm getting a bit too all over the place. Yes, that all works. Great. Here's some things that you might not know about me. I am one of those weird co-founder CEOs. I also live in Byron Bay most of the week, and then the other part in Melbourne, so that's the other Silicon Bay perhaps. And I have some peacocks as pets. It's a really long story, but they're pretty amazing. They're called Hansel and Derek, and they've definitely got blue steel cranking about them. And I love to jog. Probably my most favourite thing at the moment is the Apple Watch with wireless headphones. So if anyone's a jogger, highly recommended. All right, so when I was a kid, my dad used to always say to me, like probably most other parents, I wonder what's going to come in your lifetime that we can't even imagine right now. And he always used to reference the TV. And as a child that loved television, I was always kind of blown away by that thought that television wasn't there when he was a kid, and he would constantly reference the wireless, which means something totally different to us nowadays. But it does make you think, you know, what is next? And when I was a kid, I could never think of what was next. But this little cutie here is my daughter when she was 2. And she's 7 now, so she's grown up a bit. But that's such a typical picture. Facebook, Twitter, wherever. Who has toddlers or kids? Yeah, it's sort of, sometimes I feel a bit racked with guilt looking at that picture, but it was a good babysitting device on the aeroplane, which usually ends in tears and tantrums at some stage. But what might come along in her lifetime kind of blows my mind. I can't even imagine right now. And so, you know, this quote came up at a conference I was at a couple of weeks ago overseas, and it kind of stopped me in my tracks because the pace of change, I feel, is great. It's huge at the moment. And the thought that it's actually slow right now and it's only going to get faster and faster is something that I find a little bit intimidating. But it's absolutely true. It's only going to get more rapid. And so I sort of think about quite often, well, what does the future need from us as individuals and as business people that are working in industry? What does that future call for us? And I came across this link that I'm going to play for you. And it was through, interestingly, a friend of one of my kids at the school that they go to. And with kids, having kids, you can't help but think of creativity and whether or not they're getting enough reinforcing of creativity at school, or I do at least in our industry. I'm going to play it and see what you think. We'll have a bit of a reference of it. I'll get out of the way. I'll stop my pacing.
Ideally, you want human beings to be driven from inside and not from outside.
It's a much more make it up as you go type of world for business, for institutions, and certainly for individual paths.
Going from being an agriculturally based economy, industrial economy, to a service economy, to a knowledge economy. I don't think any of us can guess what it's going to be like in 10 years.
The model that was established in the 20th century is now much more dispersed.
The jobs of tomorrow, we don't even know what they are today. The ones that are really going to succeed in that are those that have skills beyond just the math and science. Those who can sit down and be collaborative with their fellow employees, be creative and not just reactive. The really creative lawyer is the one you want.
Spending time investing in creativity and fostering imagination and encouraging exploration actually makes for better technologists in the end, because you're not limited by what's possible, you're interested in what's next.
It is not about what you know, it is going to be about who you are. It's how can I create a compelling argument. It's how can I convey. It's how can I engage.
There's something about learning by doing. Seeing, well, what happens if I put this with this? The dots get connected and make a whole that you recognize.
part of learning is being with a mystery and asking questions.
My comfort with who I am, my level of engagement with others, my curiosity, my empathy, those are the central tenets of what's going to be successful tomorrow.
A child who's allowed to develop their capacities and to kind of have their own inner compass, they could live the life that they may feel the most called to do, because all else kind of fails in comparison.
It's pretty amazing little video. I don't know who wants their kids to go to that kind of school. I know I definitely do. But what it really showed to me is that the kind of thinking that we need. Black hole. The kind of thinking that we need in the future is great if we can train up our kids to be that way. But the thing is, we need that now. And who's seen this quote before? That there's some research out there that if you ask kids in second grade how creative do they think they are, they're like, yep, I am so creative, 95%. But then it just goes down until you hit senior school, and then the amount of people that respond, yes, I'm creative, is actually 5%. Now that's really worrying, but what that tells me is that we just beat it out of them. We beat it out of ourselves, and the system beats it out of us as we grow up, and we think that we're not creative, or we're not placing importance on creativity. I remember that I used to love art when I was in high school, and I used to do it a lot, but as soon as I got to year 11 and 12, I said to my art teacher, I'm giving it up. And he's like, why? And I'm like, oh, it won't get me anywhere in work. It's not going to get me anywhere in future. So pretty driven back then. It's a bit scary example, isn't it? But it's that kind of mindset that continues through into university and actually into organisations, is my belief. But we need creativity more than ever. And creativity is actually a muscle that we can flex. It's something that we can practice at and get better at. So for all of the years that I feel like I abandoned creativity, when I found myself in this career again, I found that I was flexing that muscle and using it regularly. And the more you use it, the better that you get at it. This is practicing what I preach at home. So this is some little hacked prototype monsters that we create at home. So my husband went about trying to create Godzilla and Gamera. So my little boy is obsessed at the moment with Godzilla. But finding Godzilla in a toy store locally is not that easy. You can't actually find many of them. If anyone knows where I can find Godzilla and Gamera, let me know. But what this is a hack of a T-Rex with the back sort of little parts of another dinosaur cut off, and the tail of that one was put onto Gamera, which is actually a turtle, and some sort of flames that were coming out, and finger puppet head. So Gamera is a turtle. I didn't know that. I'm sure that there's people in the room that know that. The things I'm learning. But this then became a bit of a thing in our household, and so then Blake, who's now 8, wanted to focus on making his own versions of monsters. And this is Hippozilla here, that is, of course, a pterodactyl wings with a hippo, and more of those cool flames. And Katsu is just a giant cat with wings. And so at any moment in time, I can walk around my house and find these little beasts in the corner having fights. And it's pretty cool. And I suppose we make a conscious effort to try and bring that creative thinking to our children at home, because we're aware that at school it's going to diminish and it's going to get less prioritised, which is concerning. The thing that also sparks conversations is about our backgrounds. So as I was saying before, when I found myself in this more creative kind of career, I was somewhat surprised. So my background is as a psychologist. And as we're hearing now, understanding humans, luckily for me, is actually something that's quite relevant to technology and innovation nowadays. But when I was finishing psychology, I think this is the last area that I would have thought that I'd find myself. Now that's as compared to my husband, who's an industrial designer. And he was taught problem solving and creative problem solving as a way that he did assignments and research day to day. He's often floored by the fact that I spent my years at uni writing massive documentation justifying why we should do something or another and which theory is best, which sounds a little bit similar to organisations in some ways. But he was actually learning by doing. So he was learning by being given a problem and a human sort of thing, a human issue to sort of solve for and create something out of that. The other reason that it comes up a lot in our household, I suppose, is this creativity and what's our background, is that my husband is also my business partner. So I know what you're all thinking. How can that work? How can a psychologist actually be creative? But it is something, again, that we work on. So building creative confidence is, again, a key focus. And it's a key focus on, it should be a focus on us internally as individuals working inside organisations to try and bring that to the forefront. That's my grown-up little girl, somewhat grown-up, she's 7 now. Sketching, that's our dinner table. At any one time, there's probably more sketching and dress-up things than there is food, although I have not failed in the parent department. There's some chicken nuggets going on. So we're getting there. But the future that they're going to have to step into with this fast-paced and technology and innovation is going to need for them to be creative thinkers, and it's going to need for them to think in a dynamic kind of way that's non-linear. And, you know, I suppose why is that important to us now today as well is that just about everyone is talking about innovation, and we need to innovate. We've got to differentiate. And I heard only just last night, I was talking to someone that said, oh, you know, our key pillars and our values are being customer-centric and being innovative. And I sort of stopped and thought, wow, I don't know that I've seen anything innovative come out of that organisation for quite a while. And so it's not that there's not the best intentions out there. We all sort of are mindful of this thing called innovation that we want to do. But I think we're not breaking it down enough to understand what are the behaviours and habits that we need to put in place throughout our organisation and through ourselves as individuals to then realise an innovation imperative. So I suppose some of it comes back to, from what I believe as well, is organisations. So as you get, everyone's heard of the innovator's dilemma, Hayden Christensen? So, you know, obviously small companies want to be big companies, and once they get big, it's systems and processes and all of this operational excellence that seems to get in the way of us thinking creatively. And it's also a safe thing to fall back on. It's almost like an excuse not to think creatively, because innovation is hard and messy. And sometimes when it's getting hard, we like to fall back on process as a way out. And we've got to watch that. We've got to watch that if we really want to have the end point of innovation. I'm really lucky. I suppose I've only ever worked for small businesses. We call them startups now, and it's much cooler, so I'll from here on call that startup land. I started my career in that environment mainly because I thought that I had to do my time in a smaller organisation before a much bigger organisation would be willing to take me on. And so, you know, there I was, happily beavering away. What I loved about those small businesses is that I got an awful lot of experience rapidly, so I was exposed to heaps of new ways of doing things. I could actually at any point in time go to my boss that probably owned the company and say, hey, I think we should do this because that doesn't make sense. And he'd be like, yes, go do it. And so that kind of ingrained in me a kind of way of thinking and believing that businesses worked. And one of the people that used to work with me and had gone through uni with me actually got a job in a big organisation, a big management consultancy. And I remember when she got that, I was terribly jealous. I was like, oh my God, she's got a job already in a big place. And I rang her at some point and said to her, oh, how's it all going? And she said, oh, actually not that well. I was like, what do you mean not that well? It's, you know, you live in the dream. And she said, well, I was running these assessment and development centres and I had to put together reports and I saw a better way of doing things and I went to my manager and I said, I think that we should change up the way we do this. We should write it this way because it's better for the candidate, it's better for us writing stuff. And to which her manager then turned around and said, that's not the way we do it here. You'll follow the template and that's going to cause trouble if we actually change things. So I want you to go back and rewrite it the way that we do it. And I think that sounds probably fairly familiar to some people, and there's a few nods. I think that the unfortunate thing that did is very early in that person's career let her know that business didn't support creative thinking. And it doesn't take many moments for you to be hit on the head or knocked down for you to then give up and then fall back into line on that process. So that's something we have to watch out for. And I suppose it's also about balancing the fine line between what is operational excellence and what is keeping us afloat as a business, but also understanding what is getting in the way. I couldn't have agreed more with Brian when he suggested that we have to culturally look at ourselves and identify what's stopping us from being innovative. And unfortunately, sometimes it's all of those processes and the ways that we are that stops us. I loved when that little video said part of learning is being with a mystery and asking questions. And I think that's that uncomfortable part of innovation where it doesn't sit well with you. You don't have all the answers, and that you're constantly looking for answers. And that's something that in the business world looks like uncertainty. And as a consultant working with a lot of large organisations, it can be a weakness to show uncertainty. And we have to get over that kind of thinking and that kind of judgment if we want to succeed. So I'm interested, who here is a designer? Hands up. Yo, homies. Not many. All right. This is my mate Herb. He's a pretty smart thinker of the 20th century. So he's a Nobel laureate. He's also probably one of the most significant thinkers in terms of social science of our day. And when you read that kind of assessment in terms of what is a designer, who would now put up their hands and say that they're designers? Can't throw me a bone, there's got to be more of you. Aha! The problem we find. So we are all designers, whether we like it or not, because most of the time we are designing courses of action that will instigate some kind of change. So whether or not we perceive design currently to be more at a tactical level, a visual level, or something that requires a degree, but this is the way of the future in terms of problem solving and design. And we know that there's great power of design. That's us sort of paying homage to the temple that is Apple in New York. Posing, I mean, what an amazing brand that people go there like it's a landmark to be posed in front of, and then shop at the temple. Nowadays, there's businesses that are actually worth billions of dollars that have been started by designers, and what's making them successful and having huge loyal followings is the fact that they are leading from above with design. They put that at the heart of everything. The human and empathy and understanding of people is something that drives the way that they're running their business. And as a result, they're seeing a lot of customer loyalty and obviously huge returns. So design, this thing of design is something that we've got to take notice of. Does anyone know Cedar Anderson or has heard of him? Yeah, who's the flow addicts? He's my neighbour in Byron. He's actually not really my neighbour. He lives in Byron, so I'm going to call him my neighbour. But he's the genius behind the Flow Hive. So the story of Cedar is that he recently launched on Kickstarter this thing called Flow Hive. So he came from 3 generations of beekeepers, and he sort of as a young child witnessed his brother get really badly stung. And that incidence, combined with the fact that it's really hard to get honey out of beehives and you get stung and you wear weird kind of outfits that actually haven't evolved for a long time. They've just remained the same. It's like the Dark Ages. And he just thought there has to be a better way. So he spent the last 10 years prototyping or creating and iterating a design that would allow a plastic half-formed honeycomb to then be finished off by bees, and that once you saw out the side window of the hive that honey was full, you then turned a key and then honey just came out the bottom into a jar, so it cracked it open. And then once you got all the honey you need, you put it back together, the bees go in, and they then reform the hive. Genius. I mean, this is not only nice on humans and the beekeepers, but it's also nice on bees. And so this kind of creative thinking and this way of solving problems for the world that are very human-centred and have that focus on what is the personal need out there that we might have to do things differently is a thing. Interestingly, on Kickstarter, he aimed to get $70,000 American, and he got that in 2 minutes. After a day, he had $2 million, and then after the whole 8-week campaign, he had $12 million, which is just amazing and phenomenal. So here is poor Cedar that's working out how to deliver 25,000 flood hives around the world to 130 different countries. But just, fantastic, inspirational story. So I suppose I've mentioned it before, but the central premise of human-centred design is that the best designed products kind of think about and have an empathy for the people that they're designing for. And nowadays it forms a case for change. Design very much in some of the organisations that we work in is putting together a vision of what can the future be, not being shackled by what our internal systems will or won't let us be or do, but thinking forward to the future where we want to be and imagining what that can be. And there's a whole lot of methods and processes that we can do to use that to good effect, to affect change organisational wide. Because I think thinking back to that video, it's about how you frame, and it's also about how you use an argument and communicate the value. And sometimes, it's not enough to use words, and that's where design can come in. So I've actually seen in organisations that we deal with that take on a more of a human-centred philosophy that they're probably more successful than some of the others that haven't quite adopted that way of thinking yet. It does take time though, so it does build up. There's a certain maturity level that I've observed over the years where organisations are sort of fighting the good fight in terms of making people understand that this human-centric kind of approach is a thing. Don't believe me though, there's also stats on this stuff. So the Design Management Institute does a report of the most successful companies that focus on very designerly ways of behaving. And this is in America. It's actually quite hard we can't get onto it because we're Australian, but it's hard to get onto this list. You have to have been in business for 10 years, show a certain degree of hygiene in terms of how your processes are functioning, but then you also have to show that you're spending money on design capability and having that design capability not just at the lower levels but at the higher levels, so that you've got someone that's something like a chief design officer giving some kind of strategic direction where you've got design that's actually leading the way in the vision for the company, not just tactical design. And that's a really critical, different way of thinking. So I suppose if we believe that good design is like a nice unexpected surprise that we give to our customers, the problem we have in the fast-moving times is that more and more people are expecting that. So if we don't deliver on that promise of great design and beautiful experiences, we're actually going to lose out. And I think that that's been said a few times today, that you're ripe for disruption if you're not thinking in that way. So I suppose that brings me back to that business dilemma of how does our good intentions and the gravitational force of the reality of day-to-day business get taken off this focus? Because we are all good intentioned. And it's a way of trying to understand, well, how do we make it real within our organisations? How do we clear the way so that innovation can succeed? And we also understand from our own perspective what is stopping us. Herb, again, he's going to give us some sage advice all through this presentation. He argues that it's the system. So I think that we really do need to look at organisational change as a big level in terms of, are we ready, where are we sitting, and how can we deliver? This is also from the Design Management Institute, and it's not an easy thing, so it does take time. Those that have succeeded are the businesses that started with wanting to acknowledge that good design is a differentiator, that they put movement in place to help differentiate from competitors by having design areas that they built up, putting senior management into those kind of roles, and then having the behaviours and values that are spread amongst the company more than just pillars, saying, yeah, our value pillar is innovation and customer-centric. What does that mean? How do we break that out and we use those kind of core things that will actually lead to that outcome and help guide our teams? So I suppose going through a little bit of how do we start to think like human-centred designers and therefore get to that better end point. 3 simple things, really. We need to experiment more, we need to get out of the office, and we need to talk to customers. Who currently goes out and talks to their customers? Is that through vendors, or is that actually in the room, I'm going out? Whoa. That's bad. I suppose we're building up organisations where we've got more and more barriers between us and the customer. And when the customer is now wearing the pants in the relationship and can kind of move as quickly as possible, you want to make sure that those touch points where they actually do come into touch with you are actually great. And the best results that I've seen is when we're partnering up with organisations and we've got executives going out and talking to people that are their real customers, because it's those discussions that are very powerful to bring back to boardrooms when I'm not there, to be able to convey why it's important. So what's the imperative as to why we need to do things differently? I suppose that one thing that I've learnt being a psych, and we all probably know innately, is that people are tough to get to know. So again, we kind of need to build up the creative muscle and the skill sets in unique areas to help deal with this new tomorrow that we're going to fastly approach and we're actually sitting in at the moment. I think one of the key things is being more aware of where in our own organisation can we create links and cross-reference so that we can actually scout out for bright ideas and make connections that we can possibly take to market. I think part of that is conversation, and I think part of that is systemic, where we set up KPIs for different business areas that then don't talk to each other, and that causes some trouble because then we're at odds. Empathy, we've heard a lot about empathy today. It's about having that sense of being in someone else's shoes. I love to be able to reference to our teams that that's like being an apprentice. You don't actually have to say much or do much. And in fact, people lie, so you probably don't want to ask them direct questions about design. As a designer, I just want to put up my hand and say, well, I'm an honorary designer now. I would like to say that you don't ask people what they want, because much like the Henry Ford sort of reference that I love, and I'm devastated that it's not real now, is that you definitely, you need to find the solution. So how do you find the solution is by knowing what that unmet need is and where is the gap. Where's the gap in their living that they're doing awkward, weird things and hacks and step-arounds that make you and alert you to where a new, better reality or where design can help. Suspending judgment and being curious is another core competency that we want our teams to have, because that means you're always on. You're always curious about not only what's going on inside your organisation, but what's happening outside. I'm always saying to my team that, they need to be going and experiencing a service at Myer and then thinking how that applies to something else that may be quite parallel that we're dealing with clients. And again, you kind of want to have that curious why and not a judgmental why. So curious is just genuine interest in like, wow, tell me more about that, rather than, really? Wow. So there's a difference, and there's a different intent. Looking for paradox is something that we need to do more of, because it helps alert you to where a design solution can help pave the way for a better living. We all love and value those things that make our lives easier, and before that thing came along, there was that rub. There's kind of a little bit of a rub or a tension point that made us feel uncomfortable. And so paradox is that thing like, I really want to save, but I've got no savings in my account. I love fresh bread, but I've got frozen loaves in the freezer. Like, why is there a tension point, and why do I have to dig deeper on the human situation that's causing that? And what does it mean for solutions? Left and right brain, that's probably been spoken about a fair bit over the years. Does anyone sort of think it's a thing? No. I think it's a thing. And how you can make it more of a thing is actually force yourself to draw solutions and write and sketch. This is something that again, coming into this field, we often run workshops and clients are just a bit like, why are you making me sketch? No, I'm just going to write stuff. And feeling really uncomfortable. But it does tap into a different side of your brain, and different solutions come out of that. It's making you think a bit outside of the square, I suppose, in terms of what's your regular response. And having our teams do that and use that in meetings as a way of interacting and getting problem solving is just as important as trying to do that with customers. So how do we then change our habits and behaviours as an organisation to embrace brainstorming that maybe isn't just us sitting around a table talking, that's actually embracing maybe us sketching things on post-it notes and putting it on the wall and seeing what does that mean. Being experimental and iterative is such a simple thing when you're doing product and service development that I'm absolutely floored that more people don't do it. So it's simple, right? We hack together something, a bit like Godzilla and Gamera, see if it works with the market. The market liked it, we can do more of it. We can do Katsu, we can do Hippozilla. They were okay with it. Test it out with real people and get feedback and then refine is really, really smart way to give yourself insurance against actually going down the wrong pathway. So it helps you feel that confidence and take away that uncertainty that often comes with innovation, that feeling in your stomach where you just don't know. So this is probably all sounding good and you want to do it, but what's the minimum that we can do to get this started in our organisation? Because it is baby steps. I think for some organisations that are big, change is hard. It's like steering the boat kind of goes like this. So I think that there is hope out there, and it takes time and practice, and it takes some little habits and behaviours to sort of lead to bigger habits and behaviours and wins and successes. And I thought I'd take you through an example that should show that it can be doable. So, has anyone heard of gov.uk? Yep. They're pretty cool, actually. I reckon it was about 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you think? They started fundamentally changing the way that you interacted with them online. So that was their first tiny step. Basically, there is one site for government for everything. How genius. It's a big one to bite off, right? But it's also clever. And so they started with the success of that, and they've now moved up into understanding the value of human-centred design and giving people what they want because, hey, guess what? People like that. How weird. And they've moved towards now requesting a tender to train 10,000 policymakers in human-centred design. That, to me, is quite a win and quite an acknowledgement that that is a really successful way to move forward. Because who has encountered policies or some kind of thing that's come through that you just think, that doesn't make sense. Why did they do that? So giving and empowering people that are making the policies with a new way of thinking and a new way of behaving and training them up in these kind of skills is how you'll get innovation and how you'll get better outcomes. So I suppose that's a really great example of not only do they have then more citizen-centric kind of products and services, but they're also empowering a different culture shift within the organisation. Gov.uk now has actually like little design pockets and innovation labs that are throughout the government that consult to other governments. I know that they've come out to Australia and they've spoken to various departments. That's a massive shift in culture for an organisation. So this stages of change model, who knew it would be successful for the rest of my life? I actually did my master's thesis on it, and at the time it was in drug and alcohol, so I'll just preface that this was initially intended for drug and alcohol when it was created. But I think it's a really simple model of change that gives you some idea that you could apply to everything. I find that it applies to a lot. So we tend to find a pre-contemplation. We then contemplate, maybe we need to do something. So pre-contemplation is like, no, we don't need to do anything, everything's fine. Pre-contemplation moves to contemplation when you think there's something that needs to change. You then go to determination and think, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. It's going to be, we're going to move into that different mode of being. Action is where you actually start doing stuff, and then maintenance over time. Cycles like this is a bit of a spiral because you can fall down and off, and maybe not everything is covered. But change takes a while, but it can happen. I suppose I've learnt that through years doing psychology early before coming into this area. I suppose in that sense, remember that creativity is a muscle. That's Blake. That's his monster drawing. Someone thought it was a tree. I thought that was a bit unkind. We were teaching him shading. It's a funny story. They love the fact that we focus on their drawing so much and we reinforce. I started a Twitter account called Unicorn Kids to put their drawings up because as a parent you feel a little bit racked with guilt. You have so much art and it's like, I've got to throw this away now. So piles of artwork get thrown, but I put it on Twitter and they loved it. One of their Mother's Day came around and they had to write stories about their mother. I love my mummy because she cooks me food. Both of my kids were like, because she puts my pictures on Twitter, which is pretty funny. But anyway, so creativity is something that you can measure, and this is just a fun thing that I challenge you to do. So this is a left versus right brain test that you can do online. And it's an easy one, it's just some questions about the way you think. But I'd challenge you to actually do it, and then maybe do it again in 6 months' time, and then maybe another 6 months' time, because again, in line with it being a muscle, you can change the way you approach things. The whole of our team did this recently for fun, and we've got a whole team of designers. I think we've got 60 designers at Simplicit across 3 different states, and I was absolutely gobsmacked that I turned out to be the most right-brain thinker of them all. Yay for me. Go psychology. So if I can do that, and if I can flex that muscle over years where I can unlearn some of those more rote learnings that I had through university days and then out into the environment and the real world, I think there's hope for us all. So thinking about innovation in the corporate world and our need to innovate, what are the key things that I think are important? I think fundamentally we need to look at what we're doing to get in the way of innovation. I think we also need to look at pillars such as innovate and customer-centric and break that down and think about what are the behaviours that we value in people that are going to lead to that outcome. Give ourselves a ladder to get there. And then that's about shifting culture and attitude and introducing tools and techniques that are more in line with a human-centred design approach that will lead to a better outcome as well. this is no big bust, do it in one day. I think this is a many-year commitment. And most of the organisations I've seen that are more successful at this have had a very long journey and are starting to step up and reap the rewards that we see on the design index from being more customer-centred and being more customer-focused. But in essence, we need to internalise it as well as individuals. So we need to recruit against these new competencies. We need to recruit against the kind of people that are willing to take some risks. Like Brian said, the kids that talk back, my kids talk back, great, they're going to be leaders. I'm going to take that positive attitude now. Stomaching uncertainty and making sure that you're always testing out your ideas and building before you send something out. We've got to get better at this idea of experimenting in organisations with ideas before we actually launch things and seeing them as a test. It's a test. We don't have to have it right, and we shouldn't feel upset about showing it to other people, and nor should we put pressure that those people have to have that perfect before we see a working model of people's thinking. So I'm going to leave you with Herb Simon. He's had some good things to say, and I think that we'll continue with that. His advice is finding limits by pushing them. And I suppose from my point of view, innovation is uncomfortable. This whole thing, this whole product service development and trying to meet customer needs is hard. And so if you're not feeling a tension point and you're not feeling that there's a bit of a pull there and a bit of uncertainty and uncomfort, then you're probably not doing it right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, stick around, Jodie. We've got time for some Q&A, and then we'll be drawing our next lucky prize winner. But the pace of change is indeed only getting faster. I was staggered to hear that creative thinking decreases in kids as they get older.
That's horrifying, isn't it?
That is scary indeed. So, it's open to you guys for Q&A, our next round of Q&A. So the first question's on a table just to the left, near the AV. Microphone's en route.
Yeah, as a designer, clients are used to getting what they paid for. So how do you convince them that what they have in their mind is not necessarily what they want? So that what they want is not actually what they want.
Yeah, they all want to be designers, don't they? Look, no, yeah. I actually saw a really inspirational speech by Mike Montero. He was at IXD keynote for 2015. I think you should all look it up. He was basically saying that you don't invite, you set the scene for clients to say, look, this is the kind of things I need feedback from you for. Explain to me why being blue instead of purple is a good thing. And I suppose you've got to reinforce some behaviours and some rules at the start, as far as like if you have been chosen to come in as the design expert, then you need to work with them in that way, and they need to trust you. So the one good thing that I think about human-centred design is that clients probably get to come more on the journey with you in terms of decision-making and understanding why there's evidence-based design decisions being made, as opposed to then you just showing up with a visual and going, this is how it's going to be. So I'm not sure about your processes, but that's what I've found over the years is a really fundamental shift in the way that people react to and believe in the direction that you take.
Thank you.
Next question. We've got one that's just come through over social media.
Actually, this one's just from me.
Oh.
Sorry.
Has microphone.
You speak a lot about creativity, which is awesome. So my question is, how do you go about getting non-creative businesses to become more creative when that's not their foundation at all?
Yeah. To me, it's by using a series of methods and processes that we kind of call design thinking. That's like getting into a workshop situation or having a meeting that's not just a meeting where we're sitting around a table and we're talking to each other. It's actually getting people to do activities. I walk into meetings regularly and we do what's called like 8-ups. So it's like 8 little boxes on a page, and it's like, draw me the problem that we're trying to solve here. And we give them a bit of scaffolding in terms of saying, hey, we can all draw, we can do a circle, a square and a triangle. We've got, the various elements that can help. And it is uncomfortable for people. So you realise very quickly people that have got more creative vent and that are able to sort of be relaxed in that. Maybe it's people that have got kids like me that are drawing all the time. But it is about trying to force a different way of behaving in meetings to get the information you need. And from experience of doing that over the years, you actually get more compelling, interesting information than if you just sit there talking to people, because people forget the things that are important that are driving their thought process. And so it's the tools and methods that sit around this thing that we call design thinking that are critical, I believe.
Wonderful. We've got time for one more question, just right of the AV area. Microphone's on the way.
Thanks very much. So it's been great presentations. I really enjoy listening to Ken Robinson, who probably a lot of you know through the TEDx talks. He's a great educator.
Brilliant.
And I see in the schools that he really is against suppressing creativity in education.
Yep.
And I just go back to one of his stories about the little girl who's drawing in
Yes.
the back room. The teacher goes up to her and says, "What are you drawing?" She says, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher says, "Well, no one knows what God looks like."
Yeah.
And the little girl said, "Well, you will pretty soon." So it's just it's a good example of how that gets suppressed.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know how that changes.
Yeah, you've got to fight the social norms too. So I was saying my little boy's obsessed with Godzilla. We got him a gigantic, like this high Godzilla when we went over to New York recently, and we were going out to dinner the other night, and he insisted on bringing this bloody Godzilla. And my reaction was like, no, that's maybe not such a good idea. And my husband was like, yeah, why not? So we brought Godzilla along. And I must say, I had to fight that norm of going, oh, it's going to be a bit weird. But Godzilla sat at the table. Godzilla had lots of visitors that were coming and patting Godzilla. My little boy was maybe not so comfortable with other people touching his Godzilla, but it was a good lesson for all of us, and it was fun too. So you've got to constantly just look at yourself, I think, at the end of the day and question, am I going against some of those things? Where's that coming from? So it really does, that school of the lakes is a really interesting, pertinent point, because you've got to look at yourself first as well, and how are we going to change fundamentally our thinking when it's been so ingrained over the years.